Hey guys, what's up? Today I want to talk to you about my book, The Reaper's Thorn. This is my book number 10 out of the 10 books that I have published so far in my entire writing career. This is number 10. It is completely unrelated to any other book that I have written so far, and it is very unique because it's the first book that I have ever written that is not influenced by anime or by RPGs or by short stories. I have a book that's short stories, nothing to do with RPGs and anime, but that doesn't count because it's not exactly a novel. This one is a novel, and it's a book that I consider it to be my masterpiece, the greatest book that I have written so far, the best of the best, and it's fantastic. Now, I usually start by telling the entire background surrounding my books or my writing career. I'm not gonna do that anymore. If you're interested in the background of this book, there's a lot of background involved, of course, a lot of it. I can't believe how much there is. But if you want to know the background, I'll leave some videos at the end of this one. Because in this video, I'm going to talk about the book itself, the characters, what's this about, and everything inside the book, not surrounding it. Alright, The Reaper's Thorn. What's this book? It was published on September 16 last year, 2018. September 16 is the same date as the Mexican Independence Day, which is great. And I'm not exactly a patriot or anything, I just thought it was cool to publish it that day. And well, The Reaper's Thorn follows the story of a bounty hunter called Darius Thorn in the 19th century. This book takes place in 1876 and some other areas, but most of the book is told and happens during 1874 and 1876. Now, Darius is a mysterious bounty hunter, dark past, some psychological issues here and there. And this guy one day gets hired by the Nottingham Church. Nottingham in the UK, in England. It's a city there. You know, the city of Robin Hood? Yeah, that one. He gets hired by the Church of Nottingham to investigate a series of bizarre and atrocious murders, these homicides that have been taking place in the city of Nottingham, and there's no apparent murderer, no culprit, no suspects, and the church hires him because they believe there's some supernatural and paranormal stuff going on around these murders. So they hire this bounty hunter, which is kind of famous in the underground area, in the black market, for his skills of hunting down ghosts and these bizarre otherworldly creatures. Now, Darius is well acquainted with the ghost, the monster behind these atrocious homicides, and he's deeply connected to that thing, that monster, that ghost, which he calls a wraith. A wraith is a mythological creature. You probably know about it, you've seen, it's a classic monster that's all darkness, hooded figure floating around. That's a wraith. And he knows this thing, this creature. So as soon as the Nottingham Church, St. Mary's Church in Nottingham, hires Darius to investigate these murders and hunt down this creature and destroy it, vanquish this creature, we start seeing that there's a personal connection between this monster and the protagonist. So it starts a quest of, one thing after the other, one tragic event leads to another tragic event. It's just like a domino effect, one thing happens and then that thing makes another thing happen and so on. And it's a career, sort of like a race for Darius to find this monster and vanquish it as soon as possible, because he's starting to realize that this creature a long time ago did something to him, and that something is deeply connected to his lifespan. So Darius realizes that, well, he doesn't realize that he kind of becomes obsessed with this ghost, with this wraith, and his quest is to vanquish, to try and find this creature and kill it, to destroy it. But of course, along the way, he meets other characters that are connected to the wraith or unconnected to the wraith, not connected to the wraith, and just deeply involved in the overall plot. And he, halfway through the book, I'm not gonna spoil too much, he meets another character, which is the other protagonist of this book. This book not only has one main character, but two. She's a witch. Yes, a real witch. And not the kind of witch we see in anime. Nope. Like a real deal. And her name is Charlotte. And she's also deeply connected to this wraith. That's all I'm gonna say about her. She's a pretty mysterious character, awesome character, and there's a lot of psychological and philosophical agenda involved behind these events, the events of this book, and also the characters themselves. Now, there's history in this book, there is historical events here, depicted here, so in the end I am combining fiction with non-fiction, fiction with historical events, fantasy with history, just like many other books out there that you have probably read already. But anyway, what's to know about this book? First of all, this is my third book in English. Well, sort of like my fourth one. I mean, before this I translated another book called Seven Shadows, which was originally written in Spanish, and then I translated that book to English. But it was originally written in Spanish. This was originally written in English while I was in England, living actually in Nottingham. I lived in Nottingham, I visited London, I visited Berlin in Germany, specifically a place called Johannstift, which is sort of like a village, and I also, well, sort of like visited my own city. I never in my life had I made a tourist life of myself in my own city, and I had to, because some of the events of this book happen in Guadalajara, Mexico, in my city, where I'm from. Now, yes, there's history in this book, but don't think that it's a historical book. It's not. This is one of those books that have bits and bits of history here and there, some paragraphs revolving around certain historical events that happened in these various cities that I'm talking about, specifically in Nottingham, Berlin, and Guadalajara. So, it's a very interesting book. It's not only, I mean, this is one of those books that have a little bit of everything. I know my brand of my writing career has always been, of my literature has always been dark fantasy or medieval fantasy, something like that. But in this book, I've told people before that yes, it is a very dark book. There's a lot of darkness involved in this book, but it's not all that. It's also history, it's also philosophy. There's a lot of my own way of thinking in life, my views, my political views, my life views, philosophy, idealism, everything. I put those feelings and thoughts into my character. Now, what are the influences in this book? What drove me to write this book? Well, like I said, there's a lot of background involved, but the main background is the same background as there is in every single one of my books. My main influence, people often ask me what influenced me to write this book or this other book or this one in particular. I always reply the same thing. My own personal experiences. Every single book had a couple of influences, external influences, but the main influence in each and every one of my books is my own personal experiences, my own personal life, what I feel, what I think on certain subjects or topics in life, and all that jazz. Another big thing that influenced this book, there are two books in particular that greatly influenced this book, because you see, most of my books that I have written so far are heavily influenced by certain JRPGs or certain RPG franchises or series or certain anime series or maybe some movies here and there. But when it came to this book, there's almost zero RPG influence in it, almost zero anime influence in it. I mean, there's a little bit there, like some character descriptions, the clothes they're wearing, and none of my characters are sexualized, don't worry about that. Yeah, you're thinking anime JRPGs, he's talking about the characters' dresses. No, there's nothing like that in this book. It's a serious book. And the influence in this book mainly came from two of my favorite books of all time. The first one is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. That's one of my favorite books of all time. And ever since I started writing, I want to try to write something to create a story that was influenced by that book, and I couldn't do it. You know, other ideas, other stories got in the way always, and I ended up publishing and writing something different. But with this book, I finally got my shit together, and I said to myself, I'm gonna do it. You know, I love this book. I just need to translate that book into my heart and put, you know, the results into this one. And it's heavily influenced by that book, although it's vastly different. This book is not about vampires and shit, but it does have a little resemblance. It's just influence. Interview with the Vampire, great book, one of my favorite books of all time. There's also another book, which comes the history part. That book is called The Historian. The Historian is a book written by Elizabeth Kostova, pretty famous book about the whole story of Dracula and Vlad Tepes or Tepes, whatever. The whole story is a pretty thick book, almost 1,000 pages long. It's a great book, one of my favorite books of all time. And those books, Interview with the Vampire and The Historian, are books that are actually the same as this one. Fiction combined with non-fiction. History with fantasy at the same time. This book is no exception. This is heavily influenced by those books, but maybe in terms of writing. I usually write a lot of dialogues and bring out a lot of characters in my books. But in this one, it focuses more on the narrative. I mean, there's a lot to read here. It's not just dialogue and dialogue after another. There's a lot of, you know, long paragraphs, narrative. This book is told in first person through Darius's eyes and then through Charlotte's eyes. So the entire book, almost 90% of the book is told in first person. Which made it more interesting because that way it got a little bit more personal with me. Whenever I write something in first person, I feel connected to the characters. And of course, these characters are my creations. They have a lot of me, but at the same time, they're different. I mean, for example, I don't believe in ghosts, but my character does, because ghosts are very real in this fictional and at the same time non-fictional universe. But anyway, The Reaper's Thorn, it's a great book. This is, like I said, it's my masterpiece. It's what I consider the best book I have ever written in my life. My English here, I think it's very deep, I don't know, it's much better than previous books. If you guys have already read Terra Gaiden or Seven Shadows, you will notice that, I don't know, maybe my English is kind of clunky there. Maybe it's not the greatest. I definitely could use some improvement, but I feel like I improved in this book. So both my writing, my narrative, my descriptions I just hit the nail here, I believe. Maybe in a couple of years I will read this book and say, no, I need to change everything, but that's just me. That's just the artist in me, the perfectionist. The Reaper's Thorn, great book. Give it a chance if you want to. It's something different. I mean, I know most of you guys are here because of video games, anime series, mostly about RPGs. But if you want to take a look at something different, maybe take all of those really dark stories from some WRPGs, Western RPGs, and maybe you'll get a feeling in this book, because after all, it's a very Gothic book. I mean, it has Gothic written all over its face. It's a Gothic book, Gothic characters, Victorian characters. This happens during the Victorian era, the real Victorian era, which was awesome in the 19th century. And it all happens during the last decades of the 19th century, and there's also a little bit of the 15th century involved. That's a huge spoiler, and I don't want to tell you any more than what you should already know. Anyway, The Reaper's Thorn, guys, check this book out. I'll leave the link to it in the description where you can buy it on Amazon, both the printed version, like the one I have right here, or the digital version if you want to read it on your tablet or your iPhone or your whatever. That's it. The Reaper's Thorn, check it out. Great book, one of the greatest books, if not the greatest books, the greatest book I have ever written in my entire life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time.